The thunder of hooves against the dusty Arizona soil was the only warning Eleanor Jane Mitchell had before the man came bursting through the tree line, his body slumped over his horse as crimson bloomed across his shirt. Her heart stopped as the stranger's mount stumbled to a halt mere feet from where she knelt by the creek, washboard momentarily forgotten as she stared wide-eyed at the wounded cowboy sliding from his saddle. It was 1882, and life in Copper Canyon was harsh enough without strangers bleeding on your doorstep. Jane, as everyone called her, had just turned 22 and had been managing the small homestead alone since her father's passing 3 months prior. "Help," the stranger groaned, his face contorted in pain as he clutched his side. "Please." Jane hesitated only a moment before rushing to his side. Though she'd learned caution living on the frontier, she couldn't ignore someone in need. She helped him to his feet, surprised by his height and the breadth of his shoulders despite his wounded state. "I've got you," she said, letting him lean against her as they stumbled toward her cabin. "Can you tell me your name?" "Wade," he managed through gritted teeth. "Wade Quincy." "Well, Mr. Quincy, I hope you're not running from the law, because I'd hate to have wasted good whiskey on patching up an outlaw." Despite his pain, his lips twitched. "No, madam, just the wrong end of a cattle dispute." Inside the cabin, Jane cleared her small table with one sweep of her arm, helping Wade onto it. She worked quickly, cutting away his blood-soaked shirt to reveal a bullet wound in his side. Thankfully, it appeared the bullet had passed clean through. "You're lucky," she murmured, reaching for her father's whiskey. "This is going to hurt." Wade nodded, his jaw clenched tight. When the alcohol hit his wound, he growled but didn't cry out. Jane admired his fortitude as she cleaned and bandaged the injury with practiced hands. Living alone on the frontier had taught her many skills, including basic doctoring. "You've done this before," Wade observed, watching her work. "My father was prone to accidents," she replied, not looking up, "and we were too far from town for a doctor most times." "Was." Jane's hands stilled momentarily. "He passed this spring. Pneumonia." "I'm sorry," Wade said, and something in his voice made her believe he meant it. "You've been out here alone since then." She tied off the bandage before answering. "I manage. I don't doubt it, Miss Mitchell." "Jane Mitchell?" Wade attempted to sit up but winced as the movement pulled at his wound. Jane pressed him back down with a firm hand. "You're not going anywhere tonight, Mr. Quincy. That wound needs rest." He looked about to argue but then sighed in resignation. "I'm indebted to you, Miss Mitchell, but I should warn you the men who did this might come looking." Jane's stomach tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. "Then we'd best get you hidden, hadn't we?" She helped Wade to her father's bed in the corner of the one-room cabin. As night fell, Jane sat by the window with her father's rifle across her lap, watching the darkness for signs of trouble. Wade drifted in and out of consciousness, fever taking hold by midnight. Jane bathed his forehead with cool cloths, listening to his delirious mumblings about cattle rustlers and someone named Thomas. By morning, his fever had broken, and Jane found herself staring into the clearest blue eyes she'd ever seen. Wade was fully awake now, studying her with an intensity that made her self-conscious of her disheveled appearance after the long night's vigil. "You stayed up watching over me," he said. It wasn't a question. "Couldn't very well have you dying after I used the last of Pa's good whiskey on you," she replied, attempting to sound flippant. A smile tugged at his lips. "Of course not, that would be wasteful." Over the next few days, Wade regained his strength slowly. Jane learned he was a rancher from north of Tucson who'd come to track down cattle thieves targeting small spreads in the territory. He'd caught up to them, but had been outnumbered and shot for his trouble. "They're part of the Hollister gang," Wade explained as Jane changed his bandage on the third day. "Small-time outlaws getting bolder. They've been terrorizing homesteaders and small ranchers across 3 counties. And you thought you'd take them on alone?" Jane raised an eyebrow. "That seems foolhardy, Mr. Quincy." "Wade," he corrected. "And yes, in retrospect, it wasn't my wisest decision." His eyes softened. "But it led me to your door, so perhaps it wasn't all bad judgment." Jane felt her cheeks warm and busied herself with the bandages to hide it. Wade Quincy was dangerously charming when he wasn't half dead from blood loss. By the end of the week, Wade was able to move around the cabin, insisting on helping with chores despite Jane's protests. She found herself enjoying his company more than she cared to admit. Living alone had been lonely, though she'd never have confessed it to anyone. "You're a fine cook, Jane," Wade commented over dinner one evening. "Among your many talents, necessity teaches quickly," she replied. "When Pa was alive, we shared all the work, now it's just me." Wade watched her thoughtfully. "You could sell this place, move to town. And do what? Become someone's wife or servant?" Jane shook her head. "This land is mine, it may not be much, but it's all I have." "A woman alone out here has it hard," Wade said carefully. "And I suppose you're going to tell me I need a man to protect me?" Jane challenged, bristling at what she perceived as condescension. Wade raised his hands in surrender. "Not at all. You've proven yourself more than capable. I'd be 6 feet under without you." Jane relaxed slightly, embarrassed by her quick temper. "I apologize. People in town have been telling me to sell since Pa died. I'm tired of being told what I can't do." "I understand stubbornness," Wade said with a grin. "It's practically a requirement for survival out here." The next morning, Jane was collecting eggs when she spotted riders approaching 4 men, moving with purpose. Her heart raced as she hurried back to the cabin. "Wade," she called urgently. "Riders coming, 4 of them." He was on his feet instantly, reaching for his gun belt. "Get your rifle." "These might be the men who shot me." Jane grabbed her father's Winchester, checking it was loaded. "What's the plan? You hide, I'll handle this." "This is my home," Jane objected. "I'm not cowering while you face 4 men alone." Wade looked like he wanted to argue but nodded. "Stay inside then. Keep the rifle ready, but don't show yourself unless necessary. Let me try talking first." The riders pulled up outside and Wade stepped onto the porch, his stance casual but his hand hovering near his holster. Jane watched through the window, rifle at the ready. "Afternoon, gentlemen," Wade called. "Something I can help you with." The lead rider, a grizzled man with a scar cutting through his beard, leaned forward in his saddle. "Looking for a man. Tall fella, dark hair. Shot him about a week back after he stuck his nose where it didn't belong." "Haven't seen anyone fitting that description," Wade replied evenly. "Just been recovering from a hunting accident at this kind lady's home." The scarred man's eyes narrowed. "Funny coincidence, you getting injured right when we're tracking a wounded man." "Frontier's dangerous," Wade shrugged. "Accidents happen." "Where's the woman who lives here?" Another rider asked suspiciously. "Visiting neighbors," Wade lied smoothly. "Due back any time, left me to rest." Jane could tell the men weren't convinced. She tightened her grip on the rifle as tension thickened the air. "Mind if we look around?" the leader asked, not waiting for permission as he dismounted. "Actually, I do mind," Wade replied, his friendly tone hardening. "This is private property." "Funny, you're acting mighty protective for a guest," the man sneered, hand moving to his gun. What happened next unfolded in a blur. The leader drew, but Wade was faster, his shot striking the man in the shoulder. The other riders reached for their weapons as Wade dove behind a water barrel for cover. Jane didn't hesitate. She pushed the window open wider and fired, the shot sending one rider's hat flying. The men's heads whipped toward the cabin in surprise. "Next one won't be a warning," she called out. "There's 2 of us and we've got you in our sights." The wounded leader clutched his bleeding shoulder, fury in his eyes. "This ain't over, Quincy." He nodded to his men, and they backed their horses away slowly before turning to ride off. When they were out of sight, Wade sagged against the barrel, his hand pressed to his side where blood was seeping through his shirt. "You've reopened your wound," Jane said, hurrying to help him inside. "Worth it," Wade grimaced. "But they'll be back with more men next time." Jane redressed his wound in silence, her mind racing. Finally, she spoke. "We should leave, at least for a while." Wade looked surprised. "You'd leave your home." "Temporarily," she clarified. "Until it's safe. You said you have a ranch north of Tucson." "I do," Wade confirmed. "It's modest, but there's plenty of space, and my foreman Thomas and the hands would provide extra protection." He studied her face. "You'd really come with me?" Jane took a deep breath. "I don't see much choice. Those men know where I live now, and they've connected me to you." "It's not safe here anymore." They departed at dawn the next day, taking Jane's wagon and her few valuables. She locked the cabin door knowing she might never return, but the thought wasn't as painful as she'd expected. Home had felt different since her father died anyway. The journey to Wade's ranch took 3 days, during which Jane learned more about the man she'd saved. Wade had inherited his ranch 5 years earlier after his father's death, building it from a struggling operation into a respectable spread. He spoke with passion about his plans for breeding better stock and expanding his range, his eyes lighting up in a way that made Jane's heart skip. "What about you?" he asked as they made camp on the second night. "What were your plans before I interrupted them by bleeding on your property?" Jane poked at the fire with a stick. Survival mainly, getting through winter with enough food, making it to spring planting. She paused. There wasn't much beyond the next season. And now she looked up at him across the flames. "Now I don't know, everything's changed so quickly." When they arrived at the Circle Q Ranch, Jane was impressed by the well-maintained buildings and the efficient operation Wade had described. A tall, lanky man with graying temples approached as they pulled up to the main house. "Boss." "We were getting worried," the man called out, then stopped short seeing Jane. "Who's this?" "Thomas," Wade greeted his foreman warmly. "This is Miss Jane Mitchell. She saved my life and now needs our protection. The Hollister gang has made her a target." Thomas's expression grew serious. "Miss Mitchell, you're most welcome. Any friend of Wade's is family here." Jane was given a room in the main house, a spacious 2-story structure that made her cabin seem like a child's playhouse. Despite the comfort, she felt out of place among the fine furnishings. That evening, Wade found her sitting on the porch staring at the sunset. "Penny, for your thoughts," he asked, settling beside her. "Just wondering where I fit in all this," Jane admitted. "I've never been dependent on anyone but my father. Now I'm a guest in a stranger's home with no clear future." "You're not a burden, Jane," Wade said gently. "You saved my life. Besides, I'd like to think we're not strangers anymore." She gave him a small smile. "No, I suppose not. Stay as long as you need," he continued. "When it's safe, I'll help you return to your homestead if that's what you want." Or, he hesitated. Jane prompted, "Or you could consider other options," Wade said carefully. "There's plenty of work here if you wanted it. Thomas's wife, Sarah, could use help managing the house, and you mentioned you're good with horses." Jane was touched by the offer. "Thank you, I'll consider it." In the days that followed, Jane found herself settling into life at the Circle Q. Sarah Whitman, Thomas's wife, welcomed her warmly, grateful for another woman's company in the male-dominated ranch. Jane learned the rhythms of the larger household, and soon was helping not just with domestic duties but with the horses too, impressing the hands with her natural way with the animals. Wade was often busy with ranch business, but he made time each evening to sit with Jane on the porch, sharing stories of their lives. She learned about his childhood in St. Louis, his decision to follow his father west against his mother's wishes, his dream of making the Circle Q one of the most respected ranches in the territory. In turn, she told him about growing up on the move as her father chased various opportunities across the frontier, learning to shoot before she could properly write, losing her mother to cholera when she was 12. Wade listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he valued her experiences. 2 weeks into her stay, word came that the Hollister gang had raided another homestead near Jane's cabin. The family had fought back, and in the ensuing gunfight, the scarred leader Rufus Hollister himself had been killed. The remaining gang members had scattered, pursued by a posse from town. "It might be safe for you to return now," Wade told Jane that evening, though his tone lacked enthusiasm. "With Hollister dead, the gang will likely disband or move to another territory." Jane felt a conflicting mix of relief and disappointment. "I should check on my place at least," she said carefully. "Make sure it hasn't been vandalized." Wade nodded, his expression guarded. "I'll ride with you, of course. We can leave tomorrow if you wish." That night, Jane couldn't sleep. She'd grown comfortable at the Circle Q more than she'd expected. The thought of returning to her solitary existence in the cabin filled her with a melancholy she hadn't anticipated. Just before dawn, she slipped out to the stables, finding solace among the horses. She was brushing a chestnut mare when Wade found her. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked softly. Jane shook her head. "Too much on my mind." Wade leaned against the stall door. "Having second thoughts about returning home. Is it strange that I am?" Jane asked, continuing to brush the mare methodically. "That cabin was my father's dream, not mine. I stayed because I had nowhere else to go and because leaving felt like abandoning him somehow." "Not strange at all," Wade replied. "Sometimes we hold onto things for the wrong reasons." Jane set down the brush and faced him. "What would you do if you were me?" Wade stepped closer, his expression earnest. "I can't answer that for you, Jane. But I can tell you that you have choices now that you didn't before. You could sell the homestead, use the money to start fresh somewhere else. Or, Jane echoed their earlier conversation, or you could stay here," Wade said, his voice low, "not as a guest or an employee, but as—" He trailed off, suddenly hesitant. Jane's heart pounded. "As what, Wade?" "As someone important to me," he finished. "Jane, these past weeks have shown me what my life was missing. I know it's sudden, and I know you value your independence, but I find myself hoping you might consider a future here, with me." Jane stared at him, emotions churning. "Wade, you don't have to answer now," he said quickly. "Come back to your homestead with me, take time to think. I just wanted you to know there's a place for you here if you want it." They set out later that morning, the journey quieter than their previous travels together. Jane was lost in thought, weighing possibilities she'd never considered before. Wade respected her silence, giving her the space to process his words. When they finally reached her cabin, Jane was relieved to find it untouched. Inside, everything was exactly as she'd left it: the small table, the narrow bed, her father's rocking chair. Yet it all seemed smaller somehow, the walls closer than she remembered. "It's just as we left it," Wade observed, standing in the doorway. "Yes," Jane agreed, running her finger along the mantel, collecting dust. "It's the same, but it feels different, or maybe I'm the one who's different." They stayed 2 days, during which Jane sorted through her possessions, deciding what to keep and what to leave behind. Wade repaired a broken window shutter and reinforced the door, making the cabin secure for her return if that was what she chose. On their final evening, they sat on the porch steps watching the sunset paint the canyon walls with gold and crimson. The beauty of the land reminded Jane why her father had chosen this spot, why she'd fought to keep it. "I could help you find a buyer," Wade offered quietly. "Someone who would appreciate this place, take care of it." Jane nodded slowly. "I think that might be best. I realized something. Being back here, I was holding on to this place because it was all I had left of my father, but he wouldn't have wanted me to live in the past. He'd want me to find my own way." Wade's hand found hers, his touch gentle. "And have you decided what that way might be?" Jane turned to face him, truly looking at this man who had stumbled into her life and changed everything. "I'm afraid, Wade," she admitted. "Afraid to leave the familiar. Afraid to trust that something better awaits. Afraid to trust you." "I'm afraid to trust," she whispered. The cowboy answered, his voice steady and sure. "Then trust me once, forever after." He squeezed her hand. "I won't ask you to give up who you are, Jane. Only to consider sharing your life with mine." Jane felt tears prick her eyes. "How can you be so certain? You've known me barely a month." "Some things don't need time," Wade replied. "Sometimes you just know. I knew when you faced down armed men to protect a stranger you'd just met. I knew when I saw how you handled every challenge without complaint. I knew when I realized that talking with you at the end of each day had become the thing I looked forward to most." Jane's heart swelled at his words. Impulsively, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. Wade responded immediately, one hand coming up to gently cup her face as he returned the kiss with restrained passion. When they parted, both breathless, Jane smiled. "I think I just found my answer." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Tucson. Thomas stood as Wade's best man, while Sarah stood with Jane. The bride wore a simple blue dress that matched her new husband's eyes, carrying wildflowers gathered from the hills around the Circle Q. Jane sold her homestead to a young couple with 2 small children, taking satisfaction in knowing the cabin would be filled with a family again. The money she received went partly into improvements for the ranch and partly into a savings account Wade insisted she keep in her name alone, your independence fund, he called it with a wink. Life as Mrs. Quincy brought challenges Jane hadn't anticipated. Running a large ranch house was different from managing her small cabin, and navigating the social expectations of being a rancher's wife sometimes tested her patience. But Wade never asked her to be anyone but herself, proudly introducing her to business associates as his partner, not just his wife. 6 months after their wedding, Jane took over the ranch's books, discovering she had a talent for figures that complemented Wade's skill with the cattle and land. Together, they expanded the Circle Cuticus operations, adding new breeding stock and purchasing adjacent land when it became available. A year into their marriage, riders appeared at the ranch one autumn afternoon, 3 men, trail-worn and hard-faced. Jane recognized one as a former member of the Hollister gang. Wade was in town on business, leaving her to handle the situation with only Thomas and 2 hands nearby. Mrs. Quincy, the man called, recognizing her despite the change in her circumstances. "Fancy meeting you here. Heard you married well after our little encounter." Jane stood on the porch, shotgun visible but not aimed. "State your business and move on. The Hollister gang isn't welcome here." "Gang's gone, madam," the man replied. "Most boys scattered or got caught. I'm just passing through with my friends here looking for honest work." Jane didn't believe him for a second. "There's no work for you here. Town's 8 miles east if you're truly looking." The man's friendly demeanor slipped. "Maybe we're not asking nice enough. Your husband killed Rufus. Some might say there's a debt to be settled." "Your boss shot my husband first," Jane replied coolly, "and died for his trouble. I'd call that debt paid." She was aware of Thomas positioning himself near the bunkhouse, rifle in hand. 2 other ranch hands appeared casually by the corral, also armed. The lead rider noticed too, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. "Seems you're well protected, Mrs. Quincy." "I protect what's mine," Jane stated firmly. "Now I'll say it once more, move on." For a tense moment, she thought they might try something foolish. Then the leader spat in the dirt and wheeled his horse around. "Come on, boys, ain't worth the trouble." As they rode away, Jane kept the shotgun ready until they were out of sight. Only then did she let out the breath she'd been holding. Thomas approached, his rifle still in hand. "Shall I send someone to fetch Wade from town?" "No," Jane decided. "But have the men keep watch tonight just in case they circle back, and send Jimmy to alert the sheriff about our visitors." That evening when Wade returned, Jane recounted the confrontation. He listened with growing concern, then pride as she described how she'd handled it. "You're quite a woman, Jane Quincy," he said, pulling her into his arms. "Facing down outlaws while I'm in town haggling over beef prices." "Just protecting our home," Jane replied, relaxing into his embrace. "Though next time you can handle the threatening visitors and I'll take the cattle buyers." Wade laughed, then grew serious. "You're not afraid anymore, are you, of trusting this life we're building?" Jane considered the question. "No," she realized. Somewhere along the way, fear gave way to certainty. "You asked me to trust you once, and I did. Everything good has followed from that moment." Wade's smile was tender as he brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Forever after, just as I promised." 2 months later, Jane shared news that would change their lives again. She was expecting their first child. Wade's joy was boundless, his protective instincts even more so, much to Jane's amused exasperation. Their daughter Eliza was born the following summer, with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined spirit. 2 years later, a son joined the family, William, named for Wade's father. The Circle Q flourished alongside the growing family, becoming one of the most respected ranches in the territory. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Wade surprised Jane with a gift, a small silver key. "What's this for?" she asked, turning it over in her palm. "That," Wade explained, "is the key to the new cabin I had built on the North Ridge. It's nothing fancy, but I thought sometimes we might want a quiet place away from the main house. A place that's just ours." Jane examined the key, touched by his thoughtfulness. "Our own homestead within the ranch." "Exactly," Wade smiled. Though considerably sturdier than the one where we met, no leaky roof to worry about, Jane laughed, then grew thoughtful. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been shot that day? If you'd never stumbled onto my land, sometimes, Wade admitted. But then I remember something my father told me, that the best things in life often come disguised as mishaps and wrong turns. Getting shot was the luckiest unlucky day of my life. Mine too, Jane agreed, reaching up to kiss him. I'm glad I trusted you, Wade Quincy. Just that once and forever after. 10 years after Jane first found a bleeding stranger at her creek, the Circle Q had grown into one of the largest operations in the territory. They had added another daughter to their family, built a school on the property for their children and those of their workers, and established a reputation for fair dealings and quality stock. The former Jane Mitchell, who had once feared to trust her heart to anyone, now stood confidently as the co-owner of their thriving ranch, respected by the community and deeply loved by her family. She had found in trusting Wade that one time, not just a husband but a true partner, a home more meaningful than any cabin, and a future brighter than she could have imagined on her own. And whenever new hands joined the ranch, they'd eventually hear the story how the boss had once arrived at a lonely homestead, more dead than alive, and how the fiercely independent woman who saved him had eventually saved herself by taking the greatest risk of all, trusting a wounded cowboy with her heart.